My name is Angelo Lopez. I'm a Filipino American editorial cartoonist based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And today I have the great pleasure to talk to two great editorial cartoonists, John Auchter and Kevin Necessary. Now, John and Kevin live in Michigan and in Ohio, and I thought I'd have a conversation with them to get whatever insights they have onto the working class communities in both states that played an important role in Donald Trump's reelection. So, thank you both, and both of you. I thank you. I'm glad you both had a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Well,
Thanks.
thank you.
Okay, yeah, and like I said before, if you have recipes for for turkey and stuff for the next few weeks, I appreciate it and stuff. So, so let me get through with my first question and stuff. What are both of your initial thoughts on Donald Trump's reelection?
You want to go, Kevin?
Who wants to go first, John?
I mean, yeah, I can go, I guess.
um,
I just actually just did a cartoon this week where the cartoon after the immediate after the election was something like it was just a vibe, a feeling. There really wasn't anything that I could come up with that was like specifically I could address with it. It was all, yeah, it was all an emotion or a feeling, and I couldn't put my finger on it. But now that a couple weeks have passed, it's the default to satire, and I went with a cartoon this week that was "It's a Wonderful Life," and but it's the sequel, and the whole feeling, the whole vibe behind it, are that I've really been able to put my finger on it is like it's just being unsettled, knocked off my pins. The feeling of I thought I understood something, and I guess I really didn't. Um, and that is that I really thought that I believed in American exceptionalism, and that we would never elect a person, the quality of character of a person, of somebody like Donald Trump. I didn't believe it. It was hard to believe it for the first time, but it really came around to, well, I guess we just had to get this out of our system. And then the second time around, I don't have a reason. I don't have an explanation. I don't know how I can explain it other than something I thought I understood. Like you didn't growing up, when we were watching MASH and everybody in America was watching MASH, you weren't rooting for, and you didn't think the hero was Frank Burns. You didn't think the hero, the person you should root for, was Lieutenant Flag. And yet, apparently, with enough demagoguery and proper amount of propaganda, they can get a majority of people to follow them. So yeah, so that's kind of my feelings.
yeah, I'd like to echo a little bit what John said about the just feeling like like the ground has fallen out from underneath. Um,
Yeah.
and I know that I'm struggling uh, really with the why. And asking that question, why did this happen? And and I think a lot of my sadness comes from knowing that so many people didn't go vote. If you look at the breakdown of the numbers, there are there are so many more people of voting age who didn't even bother to get up off their couches.
Yeah.
And so, what does that say about the state of the United States, as opposed to the hardcore people who are going to vote for Democrats and the hardcore people who are going to vote for Donald Trump?
Yeah.
To me, that's a much more damning statement about the state of where we are as a nation, that so many more people didn't even bother to go vote. And a lot like what John said when it first happened. I was I wasn't even trying to capture a vibe. Um, for community or the country, I was and I still am kind of looking inwardly, like how am I processing this? And I've kind of been slowly doing a series relating my feelings to this to the 5 stages of grief.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and and I have to do that for myself because I'm struggling to understand um, how I feel, and I'm hoping that I will gain some insight, uh, just for my own mental health, for my own view of the world, and also for me to move on with what I'm supposed to do
yeah,
through this series of cartoons because I have to, I really have to internalize, the subject and the emotions that I'm putting out onto the, onto into a cartoon.
yeah.
And so I'm slowly getting back to, my default position of satire, but but to get there, I really do have to like work through how I feel.
Yeah. I kind of feel the same way you both do and stuff. I'm going through a different stage of depression and stuff. But I think in some ways I was kind of prepared in a way in that in the Philippines and stuff, we just elected the son of the former dictator and stuff. And I was really baffled by that and stuff. But I have to admit, after the debate with Kamala Harris, I just kind of tuned out because I just thought, God, he screwed up so badly and stuff. I did, so that was partly my fault and stuff. Once the debate came, I focused on other things and stuff. So, um, but I think in the last week before the
Well,
election, I started feeling dread and stuff. So, yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
yeah. Well, no, but I mean, I think you hit on something which I've kind of heard from other people as well, and I know that I felt a little bit about this, which is, um, yeah, I mean, you just couldn't imagine,
Yeah,
that that someone who's shouting about people eating cats and dogs would
yeah,
be taken seriously,
yeah,
and um, I'm lucky that I live in a bubble. Maybe it's unlucky, but I live in a bubble, and everyone that I knew just felt very, well, I guess not assured, but yeah, like you just couldn't believe that we would go back to this.
yeah,
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 there's so many, any other, certainly American politician, um, that there's so many disqualifying moments that you just think. I thought that there's just no possible way. Finally, we've reached the bottom, and that there's he's done or said something that would get people to pay attention enough to uh, to not vote for him. And I guess it's just again, propaganda works, and the state of the media, this couldn't really have happened back when there were more rules, and then there was less outlets, and the sort of very all the conspiracy theories were written off. Well, those are just John Birchers, or those are McCarthyists, or those are
yeah,
whoever. In the past, now people are part of it. I think what you're feeling, and what we're all feeling, and you can't blame people, is just being worn down.
yeah,
And you get worn down to the point where I do know people who are just like, I don't pay attention anymore, and they throw their hands up,
yeah.
and
Mhm.
and that's how it works. That's that's how demagoguery works. Unfortunately, it's the
Yeah.
playbook.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I thought you guys would have the answers, but I guess.
Well, I think Kevin, maybe for both of us is, and you too, Angelo, is that we're in the process of trying to figure out for ourselves, and I think that at least is a positive thing,
Yeah.
because we're I try not to be a cartoonist who's just pooping them out the cartoons that regardless, that I'm not actually feeling anything, and it's just well, I guess I get paid for this one, and put it
Yeah.
out. It'd be a lot easier to
Yeah,
do it that way. But it's good to go through this to because there's a lot of work ahead, to be honest, and a lot of challenges. So we're going to need that. But it's it's how does the the nation as a whole, and the answer, the solve for it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And as we are members of the media, I mean, at least I'm feeling this. I don't know about the two of you, but I'm doing a lot of introspection in as to what is my role. Are my cartoons going to change? Do I, should I be changing my cartoons? Because if there is this large swath of people that aren't paying attention, or are apathetic, how do I approach that? As a cartoonist, and I'm, do I try to make my cartoons more about, really highlighting issues or educating people, or am I just still just going to be, sticking it to, Trump and whatever outrageous thing that he says, um, and I would hope that that all members, at least of the quote unquote mainstream media, are, or at least legacy media, are trying to solve those, or answer those questions, or even ask those questions. Um, I the cynic in me is saying that they probably aren't, because they're much more, uh, much more interested in clicks. But
Yeah.
one would hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, yeah. Let me. I have a question about that later on and stuff. So let me ask my next question and stuff. You both are in Michigan and Ohio, right? And stuff. Um,
Mm.
what was your upbringing like, and what were the local communities that you grew up with like at that time?
Well, I grew up in a suburb of Cincinnati, and it was, and still is, fairly conservative.
Okay.
Um, Cincinnati itself is very blue, but the surrounding communities are, much more red. And um, yeah, it's still very conservative. It's middle class to upper middle class for the most part. The community that I grew up in, um, and it's weird because there is that sense of people just wanting others to like stay away. I mean, you know uh, it's got a pretty decent population density, but there's still a bit of a rural feeling to it.
Mhm.
There's a mix of urbanism because you do have, the city of Cincinnati proper about 20 miles away. But yeah, there is a more, I'd say, religious feel to it out there. There's uh, yeah, just a a much more conservative vibe to that community as opposed to where I live now, which is in the city of Cincinnati proper.
Okay. Was it close knit in a way that does a stereotypical everybody knew the neighbors type thing, or is it because what you're saying sounds very libertarian, where everybody has a shotgun in their house, you know?
No, 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 no. That's I have lived in those communities before. No, I'd say, at least on our street, yeah, everyone knew each other, and there was a, like I said, there was a pretty heavy population density in that community.
Oh, okay.
Um, but I'd say you know it was much more, at least when I was growing up, it was much more socially and conservatively, or socially and fiscally conservative. Um, there was definitely a religious bent to it
Yeah.
out there, but it's, um, the area has changed since I left. Um, I left in the late '90s, and it's gotten a lot more commercial in terms of restaurants and businesses that have sprung up there. But there's still a, a bit of a small town feel to it. Um,
Oh, okay.
I don't know. It's it's kind of hard to describe, how it is out there. The representative that like the state representative in that area, she's a nutball.
Oh,
And I mean, she's the type of person who would go in front of the Ohio General Assembly and bring, you know, doctors who thought that they were being magnetized due to taking the COVID vaccine, and they would just try to stick like keys to their faces in front of our legislature, and and that's who our who is representing that area. So
yeah.
that's kind of kind of who you find out there.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, that must be hard to satirize if real life is itself a satire.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm just being honest. It is. Yeah, it's hard.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, John, what was it like in your area?
So, yeah, so I was born in Pennsylvania and lived in South Carolina, and then my family moved to Flint, Michigan, in when I was 9 years old, and it was actually, I mean, it was the heyday, the height really of Flint. It was for me, it was like moving to the future because we were moving from South Carolina, and I actually had read about a story about Flint in like one of my Scholastic magazines, and they had
Mm.
these things called this thing called Safetyville, and they had and when I got there, this amazing Parks and Rec setup where you could play and do almost anything, everything was available to you, and but everybody kind of knows the story from Flint from that point.
Mhm.
And but moving there, I mean, it was uh, as far as community, I was in the burbs, but and not way out in the burbs. And really, Flint and the whole area had the same feel and vibe. It was a blue collar town and a white collar town because my neighborhood was there's filled with blue collar and white collar workers, and they
Oh,
all kind of hung together, and it was a solidly democratic area because especially if you were a union member, that was just that wasn't even a thought. You voted for the Democratic candidate,
yeah.
and going to Catholic schools and pretty much everybody, friends, neighborhoods, was a mix of people, which was great. But the going to school, but it was very much the Catholic, uh, the Catholic of the blue collar, worker, the social justice Catholic,
Okay.
from back then. Now, I live actually on the west side of the state now, which has traditionally been the more conservative. And this Grand Rapids area, especially, was settled by Dutch reformists, and pretty much all the hardcore Calvinists that
Oh,
Netherlands got tired of. They moved
yeah.
out. They moved to West Michigan. So, but it's interesting here because it's gone from a very closed conservative community, closed in that I don't know if the kind of the Calvinist doctrine, but part of it is there's either you have grace or you don't.
Mm.
And if you have grace, you're going to go to heaven, and you be nice to the other people. You can say hi to them on the street, and everything. You don't hate them,
So
but
be nice to the doomed.
yeah, yeah, it's kind of it's a too bad for them situation, and they're not really worth your time to
Yeah.
to get to know and to be extremely friendly with because you have your church, you have your family, everything's all set up for you already. So this was, I had gone away to college, and this was a bit more of a. And I actually had lived over here for a year before Jane and I got married.
Oh,
Jane, born and raised in Flint, from a large Catholic, Italian Irish Catholic family,
yeah.
and she was a fish out of water over here in experiencing this.
Yeah.
It was tough, but over the years, it's really, I mean, Grand Rapids, we actually have, I live in the burbs, which is traditionally even more conservative, and for the past few cycles, I've had a Democratic state representative,
Oh,
and even our U.S. House representative in a reconfigured, because Michigan keeps losing representatives, got reconfigured the last census, and Hillary Skelton is is the representative here. So like, but it's funny that a Democrat is kind of leading forward with the Gerald R. Ford, sort of civic leader that the
Oh,
Grand Rapids area has traditionally had, and wanted to represent us.
yeah.
And but it's a lot of change. It's a lot of change, and I think that's one of the lessons that probably can be identified from the last election is that you can't just base what you expect and what you should campaign to just because for the previous 50 years that block of people had voted for you,
Yeah.
because it's changing, it's evolving, and I think it's actually accelerating in the United States of that sort of.
Okay. Is that community still church centric then and stuff? My impression from listening to both of you is that the communities you grew up in were very church centric. That the people were the people you went to church with. Is that still true, or was that true when you were growing up? Or
More so than I'm sure most of the rest of the country, especially the
okay,
coast, but not as much as it has been certainly in the
okay,
past.
okay. And you, Kevin, you said that it was a church centric. What denomination actually? Is it evangelical,
Um,
Lutheran, or
it was in the area where I grew up. It was a mix of like Catholic and then various Protestant denominations. So I've never been religious,
okay?
so I uh, I knew a lot of my classmates were, and I mean there were Bible studies and prayer breakfasts at my school when I was growing up, and yeah, a lot of people would go to. It was very church centric. So I was always kind of on the outside looking
Oh,
in,
okay.
in the community. Um, but I know that it was heavily influenced. And when I was there, you had um, this was I was in high school in the late '90s, mid to late '90s, and so that was the era of the like the moral majority, was still a thing, and um, there were actually really big school board fights over like book censorship
Oh,
and how to teach things like sex ed, and it all stemmed from a very heavily fundamentalist view, religious view, and very heavily fundamentalist people coming in, being elected to school boards, and uh, trying to enact policies based on their religious views.
yeah, yeah. I was in an Asian American church in the 90s, and to me, it's very ironic. But at that time, the evangelicals I knew were very steamed about Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, and remembering their arguments then makes me very annoyed at them now at their support of Trump and stuff. So yeah, okay, let me skip that. That's one of my many pet peeves of evangelicals and stuff. But okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but okay, I'm getting off track. Okay, so okay, how for both of you, from what you observed in your communities, how did NAFTA and globalization affect the working class communities or just the communities in your two states?
I mean, it was big. In that it kind of accelerated what was going to seemingly was going to happen anyway. Um, I think the idea, and this makes sense if you think back to it, that you had China, which a quarter of the population of the world was totally disengaged from the rest of the world, through the Cultural Revolution, and after the reign of Mao and stuff. So it really to have had them, and then a lot of very populous other countries, so-called third world countries, be
Yeah.
disengaged from the rest of the world. was just, it wasn't going to last. It wasn't, a possible situation. So, NAFTA made a lot of sense in that we should, especially, the countries on our borders, to have this open trade. And, what's interesting is that, that was a very traditional Republican stance. Everything was about, free trade, let the market decide, you know, and but in any situation, there's winners and losers, and Flint's and Southeast Michigan is a case study. And okay, well, it did make sense to bring the rest of the world online, but part of doing that was going to become the labor, and it was going to be less expensive. And there's certain industries that just were not going to be able to compete in a global market. And over the course of that happening, I mean, there are people that, and it's kind of a Trumpian thing to blame it all on NAFTA and what a terrible deal it was. And then of course he turns around and makes even worse deal in his presidency that's takes over from NAFTA. But it's really, I mean, it's across the board. It's the corporations, it's the communities, it's everybody, and it's change.
Yeah.
When it was such an odd quirk of history that it's a very rare thing that a nation like the United States, any nation, but like the United States, was so set up to be so dominant post World War II.
Yeah.
And so we were able to set up this world where that at least the Flint experience of it was like what the blaming of the UAW for asking for so much. They overreached, and they did. But if if you have a chance to get dental benefits for all your
Yeah.
employees, well, that
Yeah.
and all you have to do is go on strike, well, then you do it, and then you get it. And it was or you can blame the people, or the community of Flint, when GM would come and say, hey, we want to build another assembly plant, or we want to build another parts plant here. But what community in 1950 or 1960, 1970 is going to say, you know what? No, I think we're too, we need to diversify. We don't want 10,000 new high paying jobs in our community. And so they did. So but yeah, it completely changed the paradigm too of what was expected. I mean, it was very much, I moved there. There was the union against management vibe that really was still in place, all the way back from the 30s. That's a long time, because and there was guys that I went to middle school with, like in 8th grade, who were just like checked out. They're done with school. They're just whatever. They're taking their D's and they're moving on, because they're going to go work in the shop, just like their dad did, just like their, and some of them did, and those were the, like 18-year-old guys who were buying boats and stuff because they hired in when they were paying overtime and they had more money than what they knew what to do with. And, it was, but yeah, that was it. The paradigm changed. Didn't even shift. It just completely turned. And NAFTA was certainly part of that, but you can't blame free trade for all of it.
Okay. Yeah.
And to follow up on what John was saying, it's I think there are a lot of points of failure, especially with like Midwestern and in other states where there have been manufacturing jobs, or they were it's very rural industries like farming and things like that, where you don't have the resources and the infrastructure built up to help people who do lose jobs or need more training. And there is a cultural aspect to it. Especially like in Ohio, there's like over in Eastern Ohio and Southeastern Ohio, there is a heavy Appalachian population, and it is very go it alone. we don't want help to come in. We want to do it ourselves, kind of mentality. But yeah, no, it's yeah, NAFTA, is certainly a part of it, but it is just um, there's a very holistic view that I think should be taken. Like, there's, failures of education, failures of state government, failures of federal government, failures of the corporations to take care of people,
Yeah.
That they
when they are
promised.
moving jobs. Yeah.
They had promised, and yeah, and then didn't.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. We have 6 minutes for this first meeting, and we got two questions done. But thank you though, because I mean, part of what I'm doing is I'm trying to learn. Being in California, being in the bubble, I actually don't know much about the Midwest and why things happened the way they did. So thank you for what you said. Um, you
Well,
know,
actually, so Angelo, if you don't, I know that we're kind of running short on time with this part, but I've lived in Southern California before,
oh, okay.
and I know that like even in Southern California, so I was in Palm Springs, but Palm Springs was very different just than like going over the Sandy Quintos to Hemet, and that was a very different feel, which is a very different feel than like San Diego or Los Angeles, or then going up north to like the Bay Area and and other parts. And so like California feels like it's many different states.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
like Ohio does too. Ohio feels like it's like five or six different states,
Uh-huh.
that even in this small little compact area, you go 30 minutes north, 30 minutes west, 30 minutes east, it, it's an entirely different world.
Yeah.
And then so it's kind of hard to make these generalizations about where, at least with Ohio, like how everyone is feeling. But um, yeah, I mean, I would say that I still want to learn. Like I want to learn about what my fellow Ohioans are doing and feeling,
Yeah.
and why they feel this way.
Yeah. Well, that's part of what you were saying in the very beginning about how, what are the questions that journalists are asking themselves, right? About how they can learn
Yeah,
from this experience and stuff. I mean, I know with me, even in California and stuff, the rural areas are very different than the coast and stuff. And
yeah,
even within, I live in Silicon Valley, but what we experienced in here in the 80s, when I grew up, my dad was a cook. And as a, he retired from the Navy, and when he became a civilian, he was a cook. And as a cook, he was able to raise four kids, buy a house, get a car, you know. Um, but as but a lot of the my parent, my friends were ex-Navy, kids. We're all Navy brats and stuff who were and living here and stuff. Lots of immigrant communities, but immigrant communities that went to the working class. But
mhm,
I don't know if working class in Silicon Valley is the same as working class in other parts of the country. But for us, we did face outsourcing. So like the people who made the chips,
mhm,
those jobs disappeared and stuff. But I think the problem with the working class in the Bay Area is basically rising housing prices and stuff. That was the big
yeah,
thing and stuff, is that there's still working class jobs and stuff here, but we can't keep up with rents. We can't keep up with housing prices and stuff. And that's been our big struggle here in the Bay Area and stuff, is that not everybody's an engineer and stuff, right? I think that because of Silicon Valley's reputation, that gives us a a reputation that not all of the residents live up to. I know in other parts of the country there's a resentment of Californians moving into their state and stuff because of rising,
Yeah,
because whenever a
yeah.
Californian moves into a
mhm,
state, real
Or
estate prices
or
rise.
the perception that California is completely failing, and
Yeah.
that there's going to
yeah.
be nobody left in a year. I mean, that's definitely
We're not
Midwest.
that bad, but we're
Well, but that's the thought, and it's like, no. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, like Silicon Valley, there's only so much. it's a valley, for God's sake. There's only so
Yeah.
much land. That's why it's so expensive. There's still so much money and so much industry and so much, knowledge and there, then it's going to do okay. It has its own issues, but just because some of them are moving to Texas or Montana or whatever because they can't afford to live in there doesn't mean it's failing. And in
Yeah.
fact, it's probably a California case. A lot of times, it's too much success that has led to people
Yeah.
just want more.
Yeah. Yeah. So part of my
Yeah.
question is I'm secretly figuring out whether I should move in your guys' areas.
All right, we can get you a real estate agent, Angelo. That's
Yeah.
Thank you, Bias, for coming back. I'm glad you came back. So, glutton for more punishment. So, I'm curious. Okay, so um, you two mentioned before how important church was to the communities that you were at and stuff. How, how for both of you, how do you think Christian nationalism has influenced the communities in your areas?
yeah. I'll go ahead first on this, Kevin. You
All
know,
right.
it's I don't think it's terribly different from the rest of the country as a whole. The Midwest. Of course, I don't have this is just anecdotal evidence on my part, but the reach doesn't seem to be unique anyway to the Midwest necessarily, or Michigan in particular. Um, but yeah, just some of the things that from my experience as a lifelong Catholic, growing up Catholic, and still I went to mass this morning with my dad.
Oh,
Um, that it's there is a I think an unfortunate. I don't think it all immediately goes to hardcore Christian nationalism. I think a lot of it goes to tribalism and it's the us against them thing. And it's been my experience, especially in the past, I don't know, however many years, decades, and especially this last decade, what I hear a lot more often is the world is a terrible place. The world is trying to take you away from Christ constantly,
yeah,
and we have to fight back, and we have to. There's a militancy about it that is very much in conflict with my my upbringing and my beliefs on what Christianity in particular is,
yeah,
and actually tends to be true across all religions. But one of the my questions is like in a discussion is like, okay, this Jesus Christ we're talking about Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, the Son of God. But we're talking about the Sermon on the Mount. We're talking about Beatitudes. We're talking about two commandments: love God with all your heart, and then love your neighbor as yourself. Everything else. Why do you get so caught up in all the minutia, and why are you specifically as Christians going back to find things in the Old Testament
yeah,
that are that you want to worship and follow? And it's that sort of it that all feeds into this feeling of it's the us against them.
yeah,
And even that, if you read the New Testament, you read the Bible, if you read what Jesus Christ is documented to have said, he said it's going to be tough. If you're a Christian, it's going to be tough. The world, yes, the world is going to be against you. And Jesus didn't say, so you need to form a super PAC and fund, a a person who is, I think I said this in our last interview, the person who's the very living embodiment of the seven deadly sins, and support him in order to be, because he's on your team,
yeah,
he's on your tribe, and that's where that's a disconnect that I have a daily issue with. And of course, there are people that then just go off the deep end, and that's where the Christian nationalism has, picked up speed and gained legitimacy. I mean, it's always been there. There's
yeah,
always that element, very much part of America,
yeah,
but it's just been given this voice and a disproportionate amount of power.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I can't speak as much about the religious aspect as uh, John can, because I was not brought up in a church. I was not I've never been religious, but have seen I have seen religion used to ostracize people, and that's excuse me, and that's the thing that I really have an issue with, which is um, you know what I know about Christianity, and what I know about Christ, and and things that I know from my family, friends, people in my community, is that the message that brings, like John was saying, seems to be completely at odds with the realities of what people are living, and certainly the reality of Donald Trump, but also um, you would think that you would want to help people who are in need, or people who are or to show tolerance and love to those who are different than you. One of the big issues here in Ohio was just all the ads, the Republican ads about transgender people, and and using that, and there was very much a religious bent to those ads, um, and I couldn't put two and two together. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
this this is a religion of, supposedly this is a religion of peace. So why attack? Why
Yeah,
go after people who are even more ostracized than you? And and it just comes back to kind of like what John was saying. It's tribalism, and it's that us versus them. And there, if you have that victim mentality, then you feel much more free to strike out against others. And it's just such a, yeah, it 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 really doesn't make any kind of logical sense that you would have uh this a religion which is supposed to bring grace, peace, and comfort to people, being used to attack.
yeah,
And that's what really kind of gets me.
yeah. Is it a continuation of what you saw in the 90s when the moral majority and Jerry Falwell? Is it an intensification of that?
I think so.
Okay.
And I'm sure that there's probably a lot of pushback. I mean, and this goes into conservatism, I think, as a probably as a whole, which is the world is changing, and when it changes to such a degree and so rapidly, people do tend to fall back into those tribal elements because there's a sense of safety there. Um, and you can't really have tribalism without without an other.
Yeah.
hmm
Okay.
And it's just unfortunate all around.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. John, I'm curious. Anti-Catholicism used to be a huge problem, I think, a century ago. Do you
hmm
find with Christian nationalism, is anti-Catholicism an issue or no? I don't know. I'm just asking because
No,
in the
I mean,
1800s, that used to be a big deal, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah, and that's hard to that's one of the things we try to point out is that like Jane is uh, her dad, born in Italy, immigrated to the United States just
yeah.
before World War II broke, and and he grew up in a community in Flint where he really didn't experience firsthand, you know,
Mm. Okay.
uh, intolerance, but it was certainly a thing. And then it's like the one of the things that Mr. Potter says, and it's a Wonderful Life,
Yeah.
of that when
Oh,
he's trying to entice George Bailey to come work for him,
yeah.
is and here you are playing nursemaid to a bunch of garlic eaters
Yeah.
and and stuff. That hit differently in 1946 than
Yeah.
it did now. It's kind of amusing,
Yeah.
now to refer, what was he talking about? Is it, oh,
Yeah.
that must be the Italians that he's talking about. Well, back then it was more, no, that was more of, he was saying something about Venezuelans that happened to be,
Yeah.
in that time and place. So, but yeah, it's I forgot actually what you asked me,
Oh,
Angelo.
no, no, it's just that Catholicism is, I mean, like
Oh,
even
yeah,
when
yeah,
Kennedy was running for president, that was
right.
an issue. and stuff,
Yeah,
right?
it's such an interesting. I mean, it kind of goes to like the so-called Hispanic vote.
Yeah.
That as people integrate into America, and they do. I mean, in some times it's very quick, and sometimes I'm sure that the black people that are watching what I'm saying and saying fully integrated in America. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
not my perspective, but yeah, that it happens. So I mean, people, Catholicism becomes a secondary thing, and certainly as it's certainly less of a thing. I mean, I'm sure in Cincinnati, for example, there were there was an Italian section, and there was a
Oh,
Jewish
very
section.
much so. I mean, my wife is comes from an Italian family on our west side, and
Yeah,
yeah, no, churches. It was a culture shock for me marrying into that family and
Oh, okay.
seeing but yes, I think I know where you're going. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, you did. But it's just that sort of you think about again, you go back to Kennedy. Yeah, it was a block of Catholic voters who were going to vote for Kennedy
Yeah,
because he was Catholic. I mean, my God, Biden is the very definition of what a good Catholic is,
Yeah.
and and yet here's a man who goes to church every week. Here's a man who has suffered and been very open about how his faith and his belief is what brought him through the death of his first wife and from a car accident and having to deal with his son's death later and things. That's how he talks in terms of, and yet and this is one of the things that was very difficult again to reconcile. You had bishops in the United States who were saying, "Oh, I don't think we should allow Biden to go to communion because his views on abortion and other
Yeah.
issues are counter to what we want him to be." And it's yeah, that's difficult to reconcile, but that's just how far it's come. That there is definitely a very what's now aligned with the idea of being conservative and Republican and being religious, who
Yeah.
would not vote and are happy to have the best example of a Catholic person ever to be in office. Nancy Pelosi is another good one
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
a good example of a there's just no way that they would ever vote for.
Yeah. Are you,
yeah,
for both of you, are you finding that it's narrowing the definition of a good American, the definition of a good Christian, the definition of
Their definition is, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Okay. 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 Well, okay, Kevin, you mentioned how transgender people are being attacked and stuff. Are you finding okay, for what are you finding with minority LGBTQIA plus communities, my immigrant communities? How are they doing right now and stuff? You sort of touched upon it, but I'm wondering, are they starting to see an increase in harassment and prejudice? You mentioned with the Republican ads with the transgender community, and I know Trump talked about he demonized the Haitian immigrant community. Are you finding that with
Mhm.
other minority communities too, or?
Yeah, yeah. I think that there's a there I think some people have been have feel like there's they've been given the freedom to be prejudiced, to allow to be able to express that. And yes, I've heard from my LGBTQIA friends that they're definitely concerned. um
Yeah.
and just kind of thinking back to something that you said, Angelo, at the very beginning, which was, you felt a sense of dread, just leading up to the election. And I've had several, queer friends, state the same thing, that this was just kind of a foregone conclusion. And yeah,
Mhm.
you do have the immigrant populations again being attacked. Just I believe it was like last or like 2 weeks ago, there was a Nazi rally in our state capital, Columbus.
Oh, wow.
Um, and thankfully a lot of them got arrested. And it's it just goes back to that, just back to being so shocked by how people treat others. Um, I've met, immigrants, both, documented and undocumented, in Ohio, and they just want to, want to raise their families and just be like everyone else, and they take pride in their communities, and we should be celebrating that.
Yeah.
I'm so ashamed of Ohio for how it's treated people like the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio, and
Mm.
uh, how so many of our political ads were about transgender people playing sports when I think there might be three or four in the total in the state.
Yeah.
Um, it just goes to show that that propaganda does, it works, and that really the it goes all back. It goes back to tribalism. It goes back to a group at the top who wants to stay in power. What do you do to stay in power? Well, you tell some people who are aligned with you, others are going to be taking away your jobs, or they're going to be hurting your kids, or they're going to be eating your pets.
Yeah.
Fear them. Vote for me because I will protect you. That boils down to that's what their message boils down to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm just so sad, especially here in my own state,
Yeah.
that so many of our elected officials at the top, that's where they come from this point of power, and then the manipulation of their constituencies to stay in power at the expense of others.
Yeah. 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 John, are you seeing that in Michigan too, or?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, same sort of ads that were run, and um, and again, it's the it's the strongman playbook of getting people fulfilled with fear and anger, to work against their own interests,
Yeah.
actually. And but you know and it might surprise you to think, to know that, you know, middle class, white, uh, cis, married, 40 plus or 30 plus years of, it doesn't necessarily have his pulse on the LGBTQ community and their
Yeah.
feelings about all this. But I do have, I think, enough insights in that I know there were people that are scared. I know firsthand that there's people that were, um, you know, that just are filled with dread with what could possibly happen.
Yeah.
And not, you don't have to be a member of that community to have that feeling,
Yeah.
but you obviously your chances of getting singled out, or your rights or just your life changed, have come up significantly. And yet, I mean, a positive maybe to put on this is that this past June, I was in Grand Rapids, has a Pride festival, and my company, which is an older company, it's not like a new startup or anything, had a booth there this year. And
Oh, that's cool.
I had never been to the local Pride, um, and the sense of joy of just being able on a beautiful summer day out and just experiencing other people and sharing community and eating food that's horrible for you, and all the things that people do at festivals. And they're really, other than you know in purple hair here, or somebody dressed just in a way that wouldn't be typically something that you would see. Other than that, it was just people out there being
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
and really and truly enjoying themselves, and just being able to share
Yeah.
out there. So I think you know there is a lot of joy out there. There is a lot of positivity. There is a lot of support.
Yeah.
um, and it's going to be important to try to to not lose sight of that in the
Yeah.
next however many years, because again, the playbook would be to fear that and to try to squash it and to try to get people to, at least if they aren't actively trying to take rights away, then at least be indifferent to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would just like to, also have a bit of a positive note. So, like, my wife sings in a feminist women's choir that
Oh.
is very, has a strong tradition in, in queer identity and queer politics in that choir. And they just had their concert, and what I saw was not just joy, but also resolve
Uh-huh.
to still be themselves and to celebrate themselves and to open you know to be open to others. And so there is there is that joy, there is that
Yeah.
not everything is doom and gloom, but there is resolve.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. That's a cool message. I just want to say, well, Lisa and I went to our first Pride, I think 2005, 2006, just after the Gavin Newsom had opened up the city hall for the first same-sex marriage things and stuff. And I remember we went. It was fun, but everybody was joyous. But since I'd never been to a Pride parade before, I was expecting floats and stuff because my view of parades are the Thanksgiving Day parades and Macy's and stuff. So even though I was having a nice time, I kept on asking Lisa, "Hey, where are the floats and stuff?" So she had to tell me, "No, this is not like the Macy's Day Parade. What kind of floats were you expecting?" and stuff. So I just wanted to toss that out.
And yet, if a pride parade had floats, I bet they'd be amazing, amazing floats.
Yeah. So okay. I wanted to get to a question that Kevin touched upon in the beginning about how should journalists and go upon exploring the communities as a new Trump term begins and stuff. So for both of you, what are your challenges of doing editorial cartoons in Michigan and Ohio? Um, do you worry about preaching to the choir? How do you think you want to explore how your cartoons try to touch upon different readers in Ohio and in Michigan? Or are you still trying to figure that out?
I I know that I am probably mostly preaching to the choir. Um,
Okay.
I and I'm really trying to to figure out, like, just where I'm going to go with my cartoons, because um, you know media, and I'm using that in the broadest sense, has uh, you know crystallized so much into various silos. So I mean, if you want to be just getting a certain Republican message, or liberal message, or whatever, that's all you can find those channels, and you can live in that bubble.
Yeah.
And I'm personally afraid that I've lived in my own bubble. In fact, I'm fairly certain that I am in that. And I get feedback from readers and from friends, and and it's very much a, like, yes, keep going, keep speaking truth to power, and keep making fun of Trump. And you know and they've said to me, multiple people have said to me that it's almost like a rallying cry, like looking at these cartoons, which I think is great. But on the other hand, am I using what I do to its fullest extent? Can I be using my cartoons to educate? How can I get my cartoons to reach someone that isn't like me, or that is in a different region? And I don't know. And I think that's just part of the big broader question of, how do we fight, misinformation? How do we fight, people caring about, reading the news and understanding what is going on in their communities and how it's affecting other parts of their state, other parts of the country, other parts of the world, and how the other parts of that world affect them. And if I knew, I would, uh,
Let
I'd
us know
be,
when you find
going to
out.
Pointer or yeah, I'd be, walking into the Washington Post newsroom or New York Times and saying, I have all the answers and please give me all the money.
And my email address is blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, so overthinking is my superpower. So it's not that definitely
Oh,
considered
you were bitten by that radioactive overthinking spider too?
exactly, and it can be debilitating.
Yes.
So I've definitely thought this through, and a lot of times I have to get outside my own head, uh, and especially because of my cartoons, because I more than often than not do multiple panels, and I'm trying to I try to stuff too many ideas or make it too subtle, to make it too let the reader decide. And sometimes that works, but most of the time I do have to have an edge, do have to have a point. So my outlet with that is that, well, I'm fortunate in that my main client is Michigan Public, and there isn't. I mean, it of course, being an NPR affiliate, you immediately, anybody who, my own dad says this, oh, they're so liberal, um, and they actually aren't. They actually, do a pretty. Are they to the left of center and on the whole? Yeah, but only not much.
Yeah.
And they actually, do the work. They do real journalism. They do the research. They do the citation. So that's always an inspiration to me when I want to just go the easy route and go just entirely on a feeling of, well, this is going to resonate, or this is, and I go, no, I mean, is it true? And
Yeah.
it make me go to that extra level of finding out. So, but for me too, as far as the editorial cartoons, then is that I do try to go and make them as pointed and have much of a view as possible. I write a short article that goes along with mine that gets posted on the Michigan Public site. And if people really want to know more about, and it's, and there's a group of people out there who apparently drives crazy because you shouldn't have to explain your cartoons. And yeah, that's a great point. And
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just saying this is some context around
Yeah.
what it is. And that kind of gets me to I've said I've done the cartoon. I've given some context. If somebody still has an issue with it, I'm not going to engage with them on social media or answer their emails that just want to bait me into something that I don't have time to deal with. So that's a good outlet. And then I've talked too long already, but I also have a handful of local newspapers that the same cartoon shows up in, and those are out in more rural, probably more conservative areas. And so that's always in my mind too. Of I'm trying to appeal to all the readers. And that's where I don't, where I want to draw somebody that's ticked me off and draw them, with cross eyes and,
Yeah.
have put a, arrow in an idiot, sign to them. That
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. I just want to, I present what I'm trying to present, but I'm not trying to, denigrate anybody, and I'm not trying to call anybody stupid because, they people have their thoughts, people have their feelings, and there's a myriad of reasons of why that is, and I can't, I'll use my powers of overthinking to try to get into that, and it's a losing game, and
Yeah.
it ends up with a much more worse cartoon in the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I
Mhm.
try to stay out of that.
Okay. Okay. Well, we have, I think, We have 9 minutes, 8 minutes left for this second talk. So let me just do the last question then and stuff. But thank you both and stuff. It gives me a lot for me to think about as I'm not sure how to go through the next few years too with my cartoons, but I'll steal from you guys. So
There's always that. Not us, but there's plenty of out there who are doing
Yeah.
great work.
yeah. Yeah, but okay. So okay, this I guess this sort of relates to to the previous question. But what roles would you want your cartoons to play for Michigan and Ohio readers during a second Donald Trump term? Is it resistance? Is it reaching out and stuff? Is it a little bit of both, or
Yeah,
I
oh, go ahead, Kevin.
Oh no, no, please, please, John.
Okay. Well, uh, like the day before, a couple days before the election, my daughter, one of my daughters, had texted me and asked me, what are my feelings about this, and what, and I said, at that point, I was just hopeful. I had no idea of which way it was going to go, and I stayed away from reading any polls or anything that said they were anybody that said they were assured they knew how things were going to break. Um, but I said I was hopeful, and mostly I was hopeful for that like the scales would fall away from the eyes, that they just and then be able to see and then make a judgment of how they would want to vote. I mean, but just to see as much of reality
yeah,
instead of what they've been the algorithms have or whoever or whatever has caused them to see. And that's what my hope, I guess, mostly for the cartoons, is that I'm not evangelizing anybody. I'm not trying to win anybody.
yeah,
I'm just trying to present the idea or the thought, really, and to have people consider it, and and then they can say, well, he's an idiot, or I don't agree with what he's saying. That's fine, but just to have the opportunity for them to consider something that I think that's important to consider.
okay,
Yeah, I, and it's partly, and it's probably who my main client is, who is the uh, I publish a weekly cartoon through the Substack of the former Ohio Democratic chair,
oh,
and so his whole Substack is very much trying to get a lot of information out to readers about what is going on, both nationally and in our state in terms of you know consolidation of power and um, you know you know um, how the Republican Party is breaking the norms of our democracy. So when I do those cartoons through that channel, it very much is preaching to the choir, and it is very much being a bit of a rallying cry, and showing and being part of the resistance. But on a broader sense, I I would love for my cartoons uh, to change with the times, to maybe be a little bit more informative. I used to do a lot of comics journalism,
mm, yeah,
and I've been thinking again about how do I begin to tailor my cartoons to that? Because I'm kind of like John, where I love doing multi-panel cartoons. I think it's because it really is just the best place to just overthink a topic and and get
yeah,
and get that information out. So I'm so I've been thinking a lot about going back to more of that format, being a little less pointed and more try to be a little bit more informational.
oh,
Um,
okay.
I don't know how that's going to play out, but yeah, I mean, I've just been doing a whole lot of introspection
Yeah,
in terms of what I want my cartoons to be like in the next 4 years.
okay. Well, thank you both and stuff. We have 3 minutes left and stuff, but I guess I can end this talk now, because I'm sort of overthinking now too. So, so
Well,
Well, I'm going to ask you, Angela, where would you like your cartoons to
yeah,
go in the next 4 years, and how would you like, uh, what do you think your role is going to be?
Um, you know, I was in the Philippine news today, and but they dropped me last year and stuff. But I loved doing cartoons for the Filipino American community. But even though I'm not in that paper anymore, I still would like to reach out to the Filipino American community. So in terms of, but I think I'm the similar to you. I think for me, I want to address legitimate grievances that these Trump supporters have, but I also want to fight the racism within those same communities. I think what I want is a contradiction. How can I do one? If I do one, do I lose the audience? Does that make sense and stuff?
yeah,
Like I
yeah,
may try to, may try to, if I try to address their legitimate economic grievances or some legitimate cultural difference, I don't know what, but if I attack the racism, if I attack the anti-immigrant or homophobic or transphobic, parts that come from them, do I immediately lose the audience, even if I try to address their legitimate grievances?
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's sort of a conundrum, and I don't know how to resolve that, but I feel a need to do both and stuff. But I talked to a poet, and I was asking the poet that I was worried about, my cartoons preaching to the choir, and she said sometimes the choir needs to be preached. That in the Philippines, when I was doing cartoons against Duterte, his popularity was around 80%. So if my cartoons are not going to reach the 80% of the people who support Duterte, maybe they'll reach the 20% of the people who don't like Duterte to let them know they're not alone.
yeah.
And that's the only thing I can do and
Mm.
stuff. So, but otherwise, I think a lot of my thing will be like you guys. I'll be doing a lot of overthinking, you know, you know. But I'm not really sure what else and stuff. I'll do what I do, and however my cartoons have an effect, I have no idea. That's not in my control.
Yeah, and I think ultimately that's the way it's always been, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So that's nothing new. Of
yeah,
I was drawing every cartoon I've ever drawn has been misinterpreted, and there's nothing I can do about it. So
yeah.